The main reason I wanted to talk to you is because of your article about Brock Purdy and the S2 cognitive test. I have many questions. First of all, how did this whole thing come to be? I didn't know that there was an S2 cognitive test. I didn't know any of this. How did you become aware of it?
I had no idea either. I mean, a month ago, I had no idea that they were administering this. I got wind of it. I was doing a story involving Purdy's throwing coach, Will Herring, and just about what they had worked on before the draft. And Purdy is sort of known as the mini Bosa
Mhm.
with the quads. And Herring was telling me that that was sort of working against Purdy. Is that he was I forget what quad forward I think was the term.
Hmm.
I'd never heard before. A quarterback wants to throw with his hips, and Purdy was allowing his giant quads to sort of dictate his throwing. So I thought, okay, that's the story. And then he started telling me that Purdy really aced this cognitive exam, and he started to explain it. And Herring didn't administer it. He just kind of knew about it, knew about the scores. And I thought, okay, this is the story. And so that's how I got in touch with Brandon Alley in Nashville at S2 Cognition, and yeah, he corroborated. Said one of the highest scores among the quarterbacks, really elite, and super elite in some of the specific areas that they test. And he got into that a little bit as well. So that's and the combine was coming up, and they administered the test at the combine and at other places. So I thought this is the perfect time to discuss this, and I think it's becoming more and more used. I was reading an old story that we did in the Athletic. It was from 2 years ago, and at that point, S2 Cognition had 4 clients. When I started talking with Brandon Alley, they had 13 clients, and by the
Mhm.
time I was done with the story, it had grown to 14 clients. So I think it's something that more and more teams are using. Now, interestingly, the 49ers are not a client. I talked to Adam Peters about that earlier this week, and he said that they use different companies that do similar things. He wouldn't tell me the combination that they used, but every time you ask an NFL evaluator about a certain test, the Wonderlic or the 40 or the 3 cone, they all say the same thing. It's a piece to the puzzle. Um,
Right.
Peter's exact words were it's spokes on a wheel. Everything's a different spoke, and it sort of kind of creates the wheel that we're using to evaluate. So nobody was saying that it's the end all be all, but in Purdy's case, it was to me interesting because he had been just so ordinary, or even a little bit below average in some of the traditional measures of a quarterback, height and arm strength and all that stuff. So to me, it stood out.
And it kind of blew up a little bit. It got a lot of love, at least in 49er circles. I know that was dominating the chatter. And as I'm reading this article, I'm I was so glad you mentioned Trey Lance because I was first thing that popped in my head was like, well, how did Trey do on this test? Did he take the test? How did he do? And the quotes from Brandon Alley in the article were that he scored well, but he wasn't in the Brock Purdy range. Is that everything Brandon Alley told you about Trey's score on the record? Because I don't know if you're aware of this. Brandon did another interview after your article came out with Marco Martinez, a 49ers content creator, and he said that Trey also scored in the elite range.
Yeah, I mean, no, he didn't tell me anything else about the score. In fact, I pressed him on it, and he was, quick to note that he can't give me exact numbers because it's privileged information. But I was under the impression that it was in the elite range as well. Um, I think they consider anything above 80 to be elite.
Yes.
So I thought I didn't know what exactly it was, but I just knew that it wasn't quite the mid 90s, which I think is the elite of the elite, like the Joe Burrow and Purdy, Josh Allen. He mentioned Patrick Mahomes, all sort of were in that range, and that's sort of a very special range. And uh, Lance's was good, but it wasn't quite that high.
Yeah, that's what Brandon Alley told Marco. He said the
Okay.
score was elite. It was not quite in the Brock Purdy range, but it was closer to Brock than the 80 cutoff line. And so that's why I was curious to ask you, like, what specifics you knew about the Lance score, because I felt like when I read that article, when I saw, oh, Trey also scored well, my thinking, it made me think that he scored lower than apparently he did score.
No, I mean, I don't think he goes third overall if he scored
Mm-hmm.
low. And Yeah, I think Kyle Shanahan has talked about processing speed and what he sees in Trey Lance, and that's one of the reasons why this guy gets picked third overall, because all of that is very good. So no, I don't. I hope it didn't come off that way that Lance had a terrible score. I don't think it was terrible at all. I think it was quite good, and the whole point of the story is that it's sort of predictive of what these guys would do. Ali was saying that they looked at a couple of years ago. They looked at all the starters for whom they had scores. There were some starters. Jimmy Garoppolo was one of them, who came into the league before they started testing, so they didn't have scores for these guys. So I think it was 27, and of those 27 starters, 13 had lifetime passer ratings of 90 or higher. And those guys all had scores in the 91st or higher percentile. And then the guys who were in that opposite range, the 14 who were below 90 passer ratings, all had scores lower. I mean, we're talking scores in the 60s. So certainly not elite and remarkably below elite. So, I mean, if it is predictive and Lance is, say, in the low 90s or, high 80s, say, that's a very good indication that this guy is going to be a very good passer over time.
And I wonder, with so little film on Trey, whatever testing the 49ers might have done with him, did they almost have to give that more weight because they only had, 318 college passes to go on?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be the big question. Moving forward, how do you evaluate a guy that just didn't have a lot of reps? And I think the 49ers, I think it's clear that they saw a lot of great qualities about Trey Lance that they thought that they could mold into something special. And we're still, I know this is frustrating to so many fans, but we're still in the molding process. And that's sort of the irony of this offseason, where you've got Brock Purdy heading for this elbow injury and probably going to be out all of the spring and all of the summer. But it does give them the ability to kind of give Trey Lance the lion's share of the snaps for the second straight spring and summer, which I think is can only be viewed as fantastic for Trey Lance and his development, and what everybody is expecting with him, because all of the raw materials are elite. They're exactly why the 49ers took him at number 3 overall.
The Trey Lance thing, the fact that we're still waiting from 2021 to open this Christmas present will be endlessly frustrating. But I want to go back to something that I brought up earlier with Marco Martinez. He's one of many 49ers, quote unquote, content creators that are out there. The 49ers have sort of a unique fan base in that they have a lot of people that are not beat writers that sort of cover the team. I don't know that other NFL franchises are like that. As one of the longest tenured beat writers, are you guys like aware of the stuff that the content creators are putting out there?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't aware of this specifically. I've been on the East Coast. I've been in Indianapolis, so
Yep.
I may not have been in tune. I'm glad that he got Brandon Alley on. Was it a podcast?
Yeah, it was Clutch Gene Sports podcast.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's great, fantastic. Got a little bit deeper into the subject of Trey Lance and his scores than I got in my story. So good job to Marco. But no, in this case, I wasn't, but only because I was preoccupied.
Oh, yeah. And I wasn't specifically talking about this. I just kind of meant in general, because sometimes I feel like there's tension between that group of people and the beat writers. And I didn't know if the writers looked at it like these people don't know what they're talking about, or just sort of what that relationship was like.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for beat writers. I certainly don't have any tension with you guys or the other shows that I go on. I mean, I feel like it's. I mean, I'm trying to get my goal is to get my stories in front of as many eyeballs as possible, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's a symbiotic relationship. Then I feel like you guys. I mean, it's like a radio show. I'm going to go on KNBR any chance I get because I
Mm-hmm.
want listeners to hear about the stories that I'm writing on the off chance that one of them will say, "Hey, I gotta find that story, look it up," and then they become a subscriber. we get measured on every story we do, so it's all about eyeballs and exposure, and this is part of the process. So. To me, there's no tension or animus or anything like that. But maybe I should ask you the question because you seem to think that there might be some.
Um, I wouldn't say tension. I would say sometimes I'm frustrated. But I live on the East Coast. I was born and raised on the East Coast. I have a very East Coast mentality when it comes to sports fandom. I am a skeptic of everything all the time. And so my frustration is that I feel like there's not enough skepticism sometimes. Sometimes.
Skepticism towards what
Everything.
exactly?
Like perfect example. Kyle Shanahan and Brandon Ayuk, the whole doghouse thing. Kyle's explanation for that never made any sense. Brandon Ayuk's hamstring is bothering him, so that's why he didn't get a lot of snaps, but he also put him back at punt returner in the same game. Like it never matched up. And I was like, this story is bogus and it seems obvious. And I was hoping that somebody would press Kyle on it.
I see. Okay, so you want it to be a little bit more West Coast and a little bit more aggressive
Yes.
as far as the
I
beat.
would say if I heard one common criticism, it would be that there's not as much aggression as some people like me would like.
That's a fair critique. I mean, are you saying you don't buy the fact that he was in the doghouse, or you don't buy the fact that the 49ers are saying he was never in the doghouse?
I don't buy the fact that they're saying he was never in the
Yeah,
doghouse, and I
no,
think it's
I'm with you on that. I mean, I thought it was perfectly clear, and um, in fact, the 49ers wide receivers have taken a lot of chances to say that Kyle is more critical of them, puts them to the grindstone far more than any other group. So yeah, no, for sure, there was a message going on early in that 2021 season.